Welcome to lesson 15 of module 1 and 2 for investigating science. And in this video, we're going to be looking at again about how the way the humans interpret patterns and recognize patterns affects the way they interpret data. So for the do now, is there a pattern in the snowflakes in the image? And what makes you say that? So pause the video now to complete that activity. So by completing that activity, the thing you might have noticed is that every person perceives patterns differently, and what one person might perceive as a pattern might not be what another person perceives, and this can lead to misinterpretation of the data. So, we're going to discuss how this ability to recognize patterns allows misinterpretation. This lesson does have a bit of a numeracy focus, and we're going to be looking at p values in our data and how the p value allows us to have a mathematical way to interpret data. So some meta language here for us, and you may want to pause to write these down. But pareidolia is what we looked at in last lesson, and it's a psychological priming effect whereby a familiar pattern is perceived from random stimuli. So an optical illusion is an image that deceives the visual system, and it's not a pattern that everybody might see. The two errors we're going to look at today. So there's a type 1 error, and it's where a hypothesis is incorrectly accepted. And then a type 2 error is when a hypothesis is incorrectly rejected. And then p value, like I mentioned in the BBC, is a statistical measure of the probability of making a type 1 error. So where we would incorrectly accept a hypothesis. So patterns that are not there. So over the January holidays from in 2020, we would have seen the bushfires, and this was one of the pictures that somebody uploaded to social media. And what can be perceived there, so almost an optical illusion, is like a devil's face in the bushfire, which people found quite confronting. So remember, recognizing patterns is evolutionary. It's advantageous to the way we socialize, and it's a predisposition we have from birth. And an optical illusion happens when the brain takes a shortcut to interpret information really quickly. We did mention p-values before, and so typical p-values, so under 5%, so 0.05, are considered significant, and a p-value above 5% is considered insignificant. So if the p-value is lower, there's a lower likelihood of error. So the activities for today are based on different errors, and so we can see these 5 questions here. And so question 4 allows you to look at p-values.